At the end of the book, The Panic of 1907, which was published in 2007 for the 100-year anniversary of the panic, coincidental, huh? And by the way, it lasted 3 years, 1907 through 1909. The Great Financial Crisis was 3 years. And basically, it's a panic because it's a liquidity event, a negative liquidity event. And in 1907, we had our dollar was backed by gold. They were called gold certificates. And when certain things happen, which we discussed in other videos, we had a major liquidity crisis. And the only way for the U.S. government to print more gold certificates was we needed more gold. And we just didn't have it. And in fact, people were in New York Harbor waiting for ships coming from England, quote unquote, with gold on them, so that they could figure out if we were going to get more liquidity. Now, during the panic of 1907, the hero of the day, not much of a hero, but for this he was J.P. Morgan. So we had no Fed. And what do we say about the Fed? The Fed always creates liquidity facilities based upon what is going on. So we did the BTFP for the banks when we raised the interest rate 6 times in a rapid succession, thereby causing duration mismatches. And so we created BTFP, which is gone now. Everyone fixed that issue. So when you think about the Fed is strictly liquidity. And which is very funny when you think about it, because everyone goes, oh, the Fed just prints money. Well, guess what? We invented it to print money. That was the whole point. So I don't know why people get crazy over that. But anyway, so J.P. Morgan twisted arms, blackmailed people, bribed people, screamed at them, political thing, everything he could, because it was 3 years, so something would blow up, which would blow up something else, which would blow up something else. And all these blow-ups, J.P. Morgan would then create a liquidity pool to fix it. And in the end, he said, look, I'll never be able to do that again. We're too big of a country. We need to have a different system. So that ends in 1909. So for the next 3 years, Americans basically debated, should we or should we not have a Federal Reserve Bank? And for the 2012 election, we had 3 candidates. We had Wilson, Taft, and Roosevelt. Roosevelt as the independent. Wilson was the Democrat. And Roosevelt was totally against the Federal Reserve, and so was Taft, where Wilson was more back and forth. So anyway, he gets elected in 2012, and in January of 2013, when he's now president and the new Congress is in, and by the way, Wilson won 82% of the electoral vote and basically was running on the Federal Reserve Bank. So on the first day, okay, that during Congress, they debate all day on whether we should have a Federal Reserve Bank. And then goes, and of course the Republicans filibuster, they go late into the night, so 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, they pass the act. Until this day, they still say that the Democrats passed this in the dead of night when nobody was paying attention, which is basically totally untrue, a total conspiracy theory, not based in fact whatsoever. But anyway, when we passed this law in 2012, we were an entirely different country. We certainly weren't the global behemoth that we became. We were very insular. And so our decisions of our Fed basically just affected us. No one even probably knew about it. But of course, that all changes in 1945 when we have the Bretton Woods Agreement signed, making the dollar the reserve currency. And then over the next couple of decades, we became more and more and more important because, it became that old adage, when America catches the cold, everyone else gets pneumonia, right? Why? Because we were the dollar. If we raised our interest rates, we forced all the other countries to do raise their interest rates or whatever, okay? Which also then caused their currencies to change, because you're raising the interest rates or lowering them, that affects their currencies. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that when we passed the Federal Reserve Act, it didn't matter outside our country. But over the years, the decades, it has become more and more and more important. Now, the Federal Reserve was an independent institution and not under the Treasury and not under the president. And as you know now, Bissett and Trump are pushing very, very hard for them to come under the Treasury and the president and eliminate the independence of the Fed. Now, this is causing worry across the world, right? Because people around the world who own the dollar and trade with America, they tend to be able to read the tea leaves of the Fed to figure out what's going on. And usually, they have two mandates, right? Inflation and employment. Okay? So, by the way, that wasn't in the act when they passed it. It developed over time. So the reason I'm mentioning this is I don't really care about Trump. I don't really care about Bissett. What I'm saying to you is we are now adopting a policy, and you can see it in full force every single day, where our interest rates, our dollar level, currency level, our tariffs, military security, are all being wrapped up as a package on how we now deal with the rest of the world. And because that the Fed prints the money, QE, and raises or lowers the interest rates, creates facilities when there's trouble. I mean, look what just happened. Bissett went to Japan, and they came up with a currency swap between the yen and the dollar. Well, Bissett went there and negotiated it, but the only people who can do that is the Fed. So there must have been some kind of agreement for them to do that. Has to be, all right? So taking out that Trump is president and that you would maybe worry that he's president and what he would do, that he would threaten people with 50, 60, 70, 140% tariff rates, that he would insist that even though we have 3% inflation, 4% unemployment, markets at all-time highs, Bitcoin at all-time highs, gold and silver at all-time highs, that he would insist that the interest rates be dropped from 4 down to 1%, okay? It doesn't matter. What I want you to think about is it time that we do review the Federal Reserve? Because now, when we do sneeze, we can cause pneumonia across the world. And we're doing more than sneezing right now. So, does the Fed, the way it existed, let's say from 45 till now, is that actually in our best interest? Or is it actually in our best interest that we do kind of come to some agreement between the Fed, Treasury, and the executive branch, and I would also say with Congress? And the way we're going now is we're just going to say it's just up to the president, which is great until, of course, we end up with a situation where, the markets disagree with the one person who's the president. But I would say, though, given the way the world is going right now, there needs to be a much closer coordination, who's in charge type of thing. I think that we all have to come together and figure out who is in charge, who's allowed to do this. I mean, look at what Trump did to Brazil. He put a 50% tariff because they're prosecuting the man who tried to overthrow their government. And he says, I'm putting 50% unless you stop. And Congress didn't interfere with that. And even though Congress is the only people who can put on tariffs. So where there are very, very difficult questions around individual personality, I would also say we have to kind of put that to the side and say, hey, given the way the world is, given what America is trying to achieve, is there a better way that the Fed, the executive branch, the Treasury, and Congress can work together? What do you think? Like and follow and tell me in the comments.